Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our third episode for the Hult Prize at UCL's podcast. Today we are joined by the incredible Natalie Binns, a sustainability consultant for the fashion industry. So if you don't mind telling us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name's Natalie. I'm a fashion retail and sustainable sourcing consultant. And what that means is that I help purpose-driven brands drive sales, but with sustainability at the forefront. My background is that I'm a fashion buyer. I did that for 12 years, but I became really disillusioned by the industry. I saw firsthand how damaging it was, and I made a decision that I wanted to be a change within the industry.
What was kind of the point for you that made you think, I want to work in the sustainable aspect of the fashion industry?
I think it was a number of things. So starting with me changing my own shopping habits and thinking about shopping more sustainably and making more conscious decisions about everything I brought into my wardrobe. That really started when I moved to Sydney in 2012. And I had to go through all my belongings and fit them all into 2 suitcases. And it took me over 3 months. I did selling on eBay and, well, whatever else there was at the time. Vinted didn't exist, but I think ASOS Marketplace. I gave things away. I did swaps. I took loads to charity, and it made me feel a bit sick, So I decided then that, I didn't want to have so much stuff. And then living in Australia, and they're very conscious of their environment and their surroundings, and it's more outdoorsy. I think that just cemented it. I think I just started thinking more sustainably in every way of my life. And then also in that job, I was traveling a lot to factories in Asia predominantly, and I just kept seeing this cycle that I was doing, which was traveling to places like LA and New York and buying samples and then going straight to a factory and putting another collection into work and just doing it over and over and over again for years. And I just thought, wow, even just personally, I'm creating so much waste. So from then, I think the seed was planted.
Yeah. And so in your idea, what does a sustainable business mean? So what is the criteria, I guess, to creating a sustainable business?
So I think the most important thing to remember is that it's not just about environmental impact, it's also about social responsibility. And so for me, I always, when I'm talking about sustainable business, it means from beginning to end. So making sure all the workers are paid, making sure that they have collective bargaining rights, and all the freedoms that we would expect actually in the UK in our jobs here should be afforded to garment workers, whether they're here or abroad. And then just, leaving the least trace. That's how I try and think of it in terms of the environment. So whatever you're taking out, how can you put it back, or how can you contribute to putting it back? So whatever resources you're using, being mindful of, not using too many resources, and looking at it as a big picture process from beginning to end in the business model, and including not just your business and the people that kind of work directly for you, but everybody that you come into contact with. So all your suppliers, your entire supply chain, considering all of those people as part of your business as well. And so everything that you do for your own workers, you do for all of those people too.
Do you feel like there's a specific point within the business model that is the hardest to keep sustainable, or the most important to remember and remind yourself that sustainability should be at the forefront of it?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think at the moment, mainstream businesses, they focus on a linear model. So they just think of product coming into the business and then selling the product onto somebody else. And then that's the end of their kind of chain of custody and their responsibility. And actually, there's so many more parts of the chain, and it should really be a circle rather than this linear process. So before the manufacturing part, where does the raw materials come from? What conditions do those people work in? What chemicals are involved? Then, of course, you've got the manufacturing, then the selling, and then it's not the end of your responsibility there. The next part is, your customer. What are they going to do with your product? So have you made the product, durable so that they can keep it for a really long time? Have you made it repairable, and have you made it easy for them to repair it, or signposted to them how to repair it? Are you telling them to wash it in a way that uses loads of energy, or can they hand wash it? And then the end of life of garments. Most businesses aren't even considering that. So what happens after the customer's finished with it? And are you providing a solution for them? And in my mind, a sustainable business, the brand should be responsible for all of those parts. And for too long, they've focused just on the getting the product in and selling it. And then I feel like people are starting to be a bit more conscious of paying workers and the manufacturing. But actually they need to think about the rest of the model. And to be truly sustainable, it's kind of, there's not one thing that they need to focus on, it's all of them. But I do think there's particular difficulty around raw materials because transparency, it's just so difficult to know exactly where your materials are coming from. And that's because most businesses are far too big, so they have far too many raw materials. So if you're starting a business, I'd say starting from your raw materials first and taking yourself all the way through the chain. That's probably the best way of doing it.
So are there any strategies that you use which helps the businesses that you work with become not only socially responsible but also maximise profits?
Yeah, so the first thing is that I think that the business has to have purpose, and that's something I should have mentioned before when I talked about the criteria for a sustainable business. I think businesses who are sustainable obviously have to make money, and what they do with that money is kind of part of defining how sustainable they really are. So you still need to generate profits, and perhaps you're going to use those profits for good rather than just line the pockets of shareholders and make certain people richer. But yeah, it's really important that you still do make profit, and it's just what you do with it. So that's where finding your purpose, I kind of encourage anyone that I work with to find their purpose. So an example is a brand called Neem that makes men's shirts, and they sell men's shirts well, and obviously they make money from that, but their purpose isn't just to make money. Their purpose is to clean up the fashion industry. And so then that means that they're making money, they start thinking of other ways they can innovate to help the wider fashion industry. So their product is circular, so now they're thinking about how can we help other businesses to make their product circular. And so that to me is the difference between having purpose and or just making money. And then the other thing is that I think you have to consider, when you're a sustainable business, if you put yourself next to a conventional business, the exact same business, but you're socially responsible and they're not, it's going to be harder for you to make money because you're going to be paying more for your labour, your manufacturing, your raw material sourcing, everything. So you have to think a little bit more creatively about how you make profit. And for me, that's driving efficiency. So efficiency throughout the whole supply chain. It's creating a niche, so focusing on certain products and doing them really, really well, rather than having a huge range. I find that you can actually save money if you stick to one or two fabrics and buy them in bulk rather than having 10 different fabrics. So it's keeping it simple actually is one of the biggest strategies.
Cool. And I feel like in the sustainable fashion industry, there's been loads of phases, I guess, with materials and new materials and innovation in all sorts of ways. Do you feel like there is a clear future of sustainable fashion which will integrate, I guess, the capitalist profit maximizing?
I think it's quite unclear actually what's going to happen and what's going to be the best for everyone. There's some great examples like Neem London, who I mentioned before, I think are a great example of a business who they're doing all of the right things. They know where their raw materials come from. Their own product is circular. They do made to order so that they don't make too much or overproduce. And then they're now moving on to helping to clean up the wider industry and create innovation. And so I look to businesses like that and think that's the true future.
Yeah.
That's the kind of direction that we need to go in, is thinking of the whole business model and the whole purpose of the business.
And in a social enterprise, do you feel like there is recurring themes of issues that businesses face in terms of not only running it, but keeping it successful or anything really?
I definitely say trying to compete on price is one of the biggest issues. I have clients come to me all the time and they say things like, oh, I've got started, I'm trying to do this, but it's just so expensive. And I think straight away, anyone who's going to run a sustainable business has to be really realistic about how much it costs, and also how difficult it is to find the right partners. Transparency from some factories isn't always the best. You have to really invest in, taking the time to find that right manufacturer. I work sometimes with clients and it takes me months and months and months of finding the right partner. So committing that time that it's going to take is really important.
So following from that, do you feel like there is any specific advice that you would give students to make sure that their business not only is sustainable, but also doesn't fall for the trap, I guess, of greenwashing and things like that?
Yeah, I think it's to start with that purpose and then kind of work out your business strategy from there, and just keep that purpose in mind at every step. So you always go back to what was the purpose. Because I think that if you don't have that purpose, then that's where you kind of start making decisions that are, oh, that will be a bit cheaper or that would be a bit faster. But if you've got that clearly defined purpose, then you can kind of say, okay, actually, no, that doesn't align with the purpose. And then the other thing is thinking about being low impact rather than being sustainable. I think sustainable is a complicated word that just has little meaning now. It's overused, it's used incorrectly. So often brands kind of want to say, oh, this is a sustainable dress. And actually, it might be more accurate to say the fabric for this dress was sourced more sustainably. So I think that not using sustainability as an absolute term and actually thinking of low impact, I think that will kind of help people to stay on track and kind of measure what they're doing in a more direct way than trying to tick a box. I think sometimes what happens is when we're trying to think, oh, I need to be sustainable, that means I must use this fabric tick, rather than actually kind of going into the granular detail and checking your impact at every level.
That's really interesting. I feel like, I think you see a lot these days as well of businesses kind of trying to tell their consumers and like really remind us that they're using these really sustainable fabrics, but they don't tell us about the afterlife of the fabric or the overall picture of their business. And I think that's something I think is important for the participants to remember, is that it's not just one thing, it's everything. So in the Hult Prize, there is a £1 million award at the end that students are advised to invest in their business. If you were in their position, what would you spend that on?
Oh, such a difficult question. There's so many things. But I think number one thing is the product. That at the end of the day, and this is something sustainable businesses get wrong so often, I see it all the time, especially fashion businesses, is they're selling a product that people don't really want or they don't really need, or it's not on trend. Not that necessarily we should be on trend, but I think it's not flattering. When I say on trend, I do mean something that people want. It doesn't have to be catwalk trend, but it might just be things that people need. You have to really keep your eye out for what's happening in the world, and there are trends in everything. So if there's a trend for cooking and you make beautiful printed fabrics, do you want to start selling aprons? So it's just kind of things like that. You have to be aware of what your customer wants and make your product the best it can be. Something actually I should have mentioned when I was talking about maximising profits is the number one way to maximise profits is to sell your product full price. And so big businesses, they have huge profit margins because they mark down at the end of season. So I would be targeted 75% margin or something like that when I was bringing product into fast fashion businesses that I've worked for. Yeah, 75 is probably on the low side, to be honest. 75 to 85, and so, But then my actual margin at the end of the season might be something like 56% because so much of it will be marked down. So it will dilute the overall profits. And so if you're a sustainable business and you start at 56% and you sell it all full price, you're actually, profit-wise in line with these other people. So it's thinking about that as well. You want to sell as much full price as you can. And so to do that, you have to have a product that people really want, they really love. You need a return customer. You want someone who's going to be loyal to your brand because they can absolutely trust you. You do need to probably sell to a type of customer that has disposable income. Target those retailers that you can price your products a bit higher. I think people try and fit themselves into, I want to be an ASOS but sustainable, and it's kind of like ASOS isn't sustainable and there's a reason why. So it's really knowing what your niche is and understanding it, and making that product the best it can be. And so I would say the £1 million needs to go into really honing that product, multiple rounds of testing. If you're working with a factory overseas, it should go into face-to-face meetings with your factory overseas, and it should going to see where your raw materials are produced and actually having that real transparency. Because if you seriously want to be creating a sustainable business, then you should be visiting your manufacturers as often as possible. And then the second thing I think would be expert help. I think so many businesses try and do it without expert help, and you make loads of mistakes. And so actually paying for expert help means paying somebody who's already made all of those mistakes to give you the right answer, basically. So I think if you have got that kind of investment, it's worthwhile putting it into something like, paying for experts. And that can be anything. Sourcing a manufacturer, for example, because it's so difficult to find manufacturers, and I definitely recommend people to get help with that. And also things like marketing, content. Most people can't do everything in a business, and so if you have the luxury of that kind of investment, I definitely get some experts in who can drive efficiency.
Amazing. That's all the questions we have today.
Wonderful.
But I think you've been incredible. Your experience has been so incredible to learn about, and I'm sure that the participants have also learned something. But I think for me personally, I feel so filled with hope for the fashion industry, because I think like a lot of us, we used to really engage in it, and now we've realised the kind of harm and the downside that the fast fashion industry has, and it's really it fills me with hope that there is a nice final ending path for us. So it's really good to hear. So you've been really helpful, and it's been really great having you here. So
thanks for having me. This is my favourite subject to talk about, is sustainable fashion.
Me too.
I just love the opportunity to kind of help people on their way and do things the right way. So thanks for having me.
Thank you.